At one point this weekend, you said that Bitcoin, and this was basically, you were asked, Charlie said Bitcoin's like rat poison. You were asked about that comment, and you said, well, it's probably more like rat poison squared. Charlie went on in the meeting to then basically call Bitcoin turds.
He is an expressive sort, isn't he? Maybe when he gets a little older, he'll mature.
I just want to ask you about that because it sparks so much controversy, and particularly on Twitter and some of the places where you might expect people who are trading in cryptocurrency to be pretty loud about what they heard. What is it about Bitcoin that gets you guys so fired up?
Well, when you buy a farm, you look at the crop every year and what prices are, and you decide whether it was a satisfactory investment. I mean, you look to the asset itself and what it produces for you. When we buy a business, we look at what the business earns and decide how we feel about it in terms of what we paid. But we are buying something that at the end of the period, we not only have what we bought in the first place, but we have something that the asset produced. And when you buy non-productive assets, all you're counting on is whether the next person is going to pay you more because they're even more excited about another next person coming along. But the asset itself is creating nothing. One of the interesting things, for example, is gold. If you go back to the time of Christ and you look at how many hours of labor you had to give up in order to buy an ounce of gold, and you take it forward to now, you'll find the compound rate maybe 1/10 or 2/10 of 1%. You know, and then you have to insure it during that time and make sure somebody doesn't steal it from you and everything. But it doesn't produce anything. And productive assets, you can pay too much for a productive asset. But I bought a farm in the 1980s, and every year we look at how much it produced the way of soybeans and corn. And at the end of that period, I've still got the farm, and I've gotten some significant income off of it. Apartment house, operating business. But if you and I buy various cryptocurrencies, they're not going to multiply. They're not going to be a bunch of rabbits sitting there in front of us. They're just going to sit there. And I got to hope next time you get more excited after I bought it from you, and then maybe I'll get more excited and buy it from you. And actually, we could sit in the house by ourselves, and we could keep running up the price between the two of us. But at the end of the time, there's one Bitcoin sitting there, and now we got to find somebody else, and they come to an end. I mean, those.
So, that's a greater fool theory. That's what you're saying.
Well, yeah, it's buying something because you expect the pool of people who want to buy it because they want to sell it to somebody else will grow, and it's wonderful because it does create a rising price, does create more buyers, and people think I've got to get in on this, and it's better if they don't understand it. That's the other thing about non-productive. If you don't understand it, you get much more excited than if you understand it. I mean, if you buy a bond that says it's going to pay you 4% a year, you're not going to get any pleasant surprises. She's going to pay you 4% a year. But if you can have anything you want to imagine. If you just look at something and say that's magic, you can do it with shark's teeth or seashells or anything. And they did it with tulips in the 17th century in Amsterdam, and they'll do it again. I mean, people, they like to speculate, they like to gamble, and if you can get something, particularly if you have something half plausible going on. Mm-hmm. If you had bought gold in 1942 and you say, we might lose the war and we might have to run off to some other country, and so let's put our assets in gold, you would have less than a penny for every dollar you got from owning stocks. Less than a penny. Now, if somebody calls that a store of value, I mean, I think they're delusionary.
Okay. Andrew has a question too. Andrew.
Hey, Warren, related to this issue of Bitcoin, you saw that Goldman Sachs just last week announced that they were going to create effectively a trading operation around cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in particular. You've been an investor in Goldman. What do you think of their decision to do that?
Well, they probably think that lots of people are going to get very excited about it. Well, and maybe already are, but they think there's money to be made trading them. I don't think they're expressing an opinion on the ultimate value. I would be very surprised if the top partners of Goldman are selling their Goldman stock and putting it into Bitcoin. But I want to cover this subject now because my friend Charlie will come on at 8 o'clock and there's no telling what he will say.
Well, that's my whole entire point. I do want to ask Charlie about it because I think when he talked about the turds, He was referring to this. He said, if you're trading this, it's like watching other people trading turds and deciding you want to get a piece of that.
Well, you're not going to get me to comment on that.
Hopefully Charlie's not awake and
well,
not watching
the truth is
right
people
now.
do trade on very crazy things over time. Imagine people selling their homes to buy a tulip in Amsterdam. If people think they're going to make money the next day, and worse yet, if they think somebody else that they know is going to make money and they aren't going to make money, it just draws people in. I could whisper something on this program, and kind of the more sillier it was, the more it might react, because there's no quantitative limits. If you buy a stock, you say, well, I'll buy it at 15 times earnings, but I won't buy it at 20 times earnings. But when you get into something that doesn't produce anything, there's no checkpoints. There's nothing to reference it to. It's gone up, so it'll keep going.
Yeah,
Well, I have a slightly different way of looking at it.
I'll sell you some then.
Well, in my life, I try and avoid things that are stupid and evil and make me look bad in comparison with somebody else. And Bitcoin does all three. And in the first place, it's stupid because it's very likely to go to zero. The second place is evil because it undermines the Federal Reserve System and the national currency system, which we desperately need to maintain its integrity and government control and so on. And third, it makes us look foolish compared to the communist leader in China. He was smart enough to ban Bitcoin in China. And with all of our presumed advantages of civilization, we are a lot dumber than the communist leader in China.
Yeah, and when 25% of the people of the country get mad because we've said what we've said today, just remember Charlie spoke last and was the most... The one development that I really do think is actually important, but I don't know any way to do anything about it. But my general sense, and there's no way to prove it, but I essentially believe people are now behaving somewhat more tribal than they have for a long time. And, I mean, people are always going to be partisan, and they're going to have religious beliefs, they're going to have all kinds of things, but it gets pretty tribal. And I want to tell you, I speak from experience because I've been tribal. And, we're confessing today. Nebraska football is tribal. And when I watch a television set and I see our guys Nebraska step out of bounds by a foot, but somehow the ref misses it and calls it in, and then they show 6 replays, I'll continue to believe it was in, even though it's right in front of my eyes. They stepped out. That's tribal behavior. And it's fun. I mean, participate in. But it can get very dangerous when one group of people say 2 + 2 is 5, and another say it's 2 + 2 is 3, and they're going to give you those answers if you call them. And the interesting thing is, to me, at least, and partly because of my age, but I actually think that, just from memory, that the last time that the country was seen as tribal was actually when I was a kid and Roosevelt was in. Either you hated Roosevelt or you loved him. I mean, nobody cared about the fact Alf Landon was running or Wendell Willkie was running against him. They just had these feelings. They either had Roosevelt's picture on the wall and named their kids after Roosevelt, or they hated him. And they thought he was going to, no third term, and, a million things. And the country was very, very tribal in the 30s, but Roosevelt's tribe was bigger. And in my opinion, they did some wonderful things, but I happened to grow up in a household where we didn't get serve dessert until we said something nasty about Roosevelt. I mean, I'm speaking. And believe me, if you don't get dessert, you're going to say something nasty about Roosevelt. And so you trained them young, and all kinds of things. And so I think I've seen a period that it wasn't that way when, if Eisenhower was running against Stevenson or whatever it might be. I mean, people, they had a partisan behavior, and they had a certain amount of tribal always, but I don't think it's a good development for society generally when people get tribal regardless. I mean,
Capitalization of cryptocurrencies approached that of Berkshire and Apple last year. And clearly, the idea behind crypto will affect conventional banking groups where Berkshire is a shareholder. You always say you didn't go into too much detail to obtain an understanding on cryptocurrencies. So what factors caused you to say that it's a bubble?
Well, generally non-productive assets remain, if you had bought gold at the time of Christ and you figure the compound rate on it, it may be a couple tenths of 1%. It essentially is not going to deliver anything other than supposed scarcity, because you can only mine so many. But so what? I mean, what does it produce itself? The check is a wonderful idea. Just imagine how the world would be without being able to write checks or have wire transfer of funds. But it doesn't make the check intrinsically itself worth a lot of money. And if you said you can't use something called check with a little piece of paper, you'd do something else to transfer money. I think that anytime you buy a non-productive asset, you are counting on somebody else later on to buy a non-productive asset because they think they can sell it to somebody for more money. And it's been tried with tulips, and it's been tried with various things over time, and it does come to a bad ending. I mean, you have a hard time. You can think of raw land. I mean, the Louisiana Purchase was, say, $15 million for 800,000 or so square miles of land. In fact, you're sitting on land that came with the Louisiana Purchase, and so what we paid $20 a square mile, and 640 acres in a square mile, and you're down to 3 cents or something. So that was a pretty good purchase of what was then a non-productive property. But it depends. But it's very hard. You can buy stamps. Bill Gross got collected a wonderful stamp collection, and it sold for more money in the end. But it's dependent on somebody else wanting to buy, hoping they will sell it for more money, and so on. And in the end, you make your money out of productive assets. If you buy a farm, you try to estimate what the crops, what amount per acre of soybeans or corn or whatever may be raised, and how much you have to pay the farmer that farms it for you, and what your taxes will be, and various things. And you make a conclusion based on what the asset itself will produce over time. And that's an investment. When you buy something because you're hoping tomorrow morning you're going to wake up, and the price will be higher, you need more people coming into it than are leaving. And you can get that, and it will feed on itself for a while, and sometimes for a long while, and sometimes to extraordinary numbers. But in the end, they come to bad endings, and cryptocurrencies will come to bad endings. And along with the fact that there's nothing being produced in the way of value from the asset, that you also have the problem that it draws in a lot of charlatans and that sort of thing who are trying to create various sorts of exchanges or whatever it may be. It's something where people who are of less than stellar character see an opportunity to clip people who are trying to get rich because their neighbor's getting rich buying this stuff that neither one of them understands. It will come to a bad ending. Charlie?
Well, I like cryptocurrencies a lot less than you do. And so, to me, it's just dementia. And I think that people who are professional traders that go into trading cryptocurrencies, it's just disgusting. It's like somebody else is trading turds and you decide I can't be left out.
To the extent that we're being webcast around the world, I hope some of our stuff doesn't translate very well, actually.
In terms of cryptocurrencies generally, I can say almost with certainty that they will come to a bad ending. Now, when it happens or how or anything else, I don't know. But I know this, if I could buy long-term puts, if I could buy a 5-year put on every one of the cryptocurrencies, I'd be glad to do it, but I would never short a dime's worth.
Have you thought about trading the futures to take a negative position on Bitcoin?
No.
You would not do that?
No. There's no reason. I get into enough trouble with things I think I know something about. Why in the world should I take a long or short position in something I don't know anything about? So, we don't have to know what cocoa beans are going to do or cryptocurrencies. We just have to focus on 8 or 10 stocks businesses, basically, that we think are decent businesses. But I do think I think what's going on definitely will come to a bad ending. I mean, you've got virtually everybody. I have a class, I have 11 schools coming on Friday. The questions will be on Bitcoin, and I won't know the answers.
Although when we sat down, Warren, you did say, I should have announced that we were getting involved in Bitcoin this morning.
Well, that is true. I mean, that would be much more interesting to the audience that we were going to issue a whole series of cryptocurrencies tomorrow. But we aren't, believe me. And we don't own any. We're not short any. We'll never have a position in them.
Lucas writes in, he said, did Justin Sun change your mind on cryptocurrencies? For anybody who doesn't know, Justin Sun bought the dinner or the lunch that you just had from the last Glide Foundation fundraiser. He is actively involved in Bitcoin. After that meeting, his PR people put out some notes saying that, you kind of listened to cryptocurrency and maybe you're a little more in tune with the idea of Bitcoin now.
Well, I would say this. When Justin and 4 friends came, they behaved perfectly, and we had a good 3.5-hour dinner, and the whole thing was a very friendly exchange of ideas. But cryptocurrencies basically have no value, and they don't produce anything. So you can look at your little ledger item for the next 20 years, and it says you've got X of this cryptocurrency or that. It doesn't reproduce. It doesn't deliver it. It can't mail you a check. It can't do anything. And what you hope is that somebody else comes along and pays you more money for it later on. But then that person's got the problem. But in terms of value, zero.
So it sounds like he did not change your position.
No, but I didn't change his either. And I had a very pleasant dinner, and those people they behaved more than well. And they gave Justin gave $4.6 million to Glide, and that will buy a lot of meals and provide a lot of beds for people in San Francisco. So I thank him.
He gave you some Bitcoin. What's it feel like to be a Bitcoiner?
I don't have any Bitcoin.
You don't?
No.
Okay.
No.
You don't own Bitcoin?
No, I do not own one. I don't own any cryptocurrency. I never will. And in the end, I may start a Warren currency. Maybe I can create one, and I'll say there's only going to be 21 million of them, and you can have a little ledger sheet from me and everything that says you have it, and you can have it after I die, but you can't do anything with it except sell it to somebody else. And the interesting thing, of course, is that Bitcoin's been out there a long time, and people talked about how it would be used in various kinds of exchange, but none of our companies are doing business in Bitcoin or anything. Bitcoin has been used, I think, to move around a fair amount of money illegally. So the people
maybe in countries where you have
so the logical move from the introduction of Bitcoin is to go short suitcases, because the money that was taken in suitcases from one country to another, suitcases will probably fall off in demand. I mean, so you can look at that as the economic contribution of Bitcoin to the society.
Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold, which, if it succeeded, would facilitate a lot of illicit activity. Now, that is not something I think the world needs. And the fact that it's clever computer science doesn't mean that it should be widely used and that respectable people should encourage other people to speculate in it. Bitcoin reminds me of Oscar Wilde's definition of fox hunting, the pursuit of the uneatable by the unspeakable.
Well, that sounds better than what I used before.
We asked earlier, Charlie, Andrew brought it up with Warren, but
I think it's a scumball activity. Does that better serve you better?
thank you. Yeah, we asked earlier about Goldman Sachs getting into the business of having a trading desk for Bitcoin. Berkshire Hathaway owns about $2.5 billion of Goldman Sachs. Does it bother you, or does it not surprise you? Just
Well, I don't expect every investment bank to agree with everything I think. They have a lot of animal spirits in investment banking.
Bill, Charlie and Warren have weighed in on Bitcoin. Do you own any?
Somebody gave me some for my birthday, and then a few years later I thought, hey, I'm going to sell that. So no, there's some really good technology in terms of sharing databases and verifying transactions that is talked about as blockchain. That is a good thing. Bitcoin and ICOs, I agree completely. It's one of the crazier speculative things where it's not, as an asset class, you're not producing anything. And so you shouldn't expect it to go up. It's kind of a pure greater fool theory type investment. So, you know, I agree. I would short it if there was an easy way to do it.
One of the interesting things, if people react when you criticize their investment, if they get mad, they're gambling. You know, if somebody criticizes Apple or Berkshire, we like it. I mean, if the stock goes down, we'll buy more of it because it's we don't care whether it's just we don't feel that it has anything to do with it. But if we criticize something that they own because they only want it to go up tomorrow, they feel we are hurting them, and therefore they get very upset about it. If they really like what they own, what difference would it make? You know, if I criticize their wife or something, they don't get all upset about it.
Wait a minute. That's a bad habit.
Yeah, probably not the perfect example to use.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.
Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold, which, if it succeeded, would facilitate a lot of illicit activity. Now, that is not something I think the world needs. And the fact that it's clever computer science doesn't mean that it should be widely used and that respectable people should encourage other people to speculate in it. Bitcoin reminds me of Oscar Wilde's definition of fox hunting, the pursuit of the uneatable by the unspeakable.
Well, that sounds better than what I used before.
We asked earlier, Charlie, Andrew brought it up with Warren, but
I think it's a scumball activity. Does that better serve you better?
thank you. Yeah, we asked earlier about Goldman Sachs getting into the business of having a trading desk for Bitcoin. Berkshire Hathaway owns about $2.5 billion of Goldman Sachs. Does it bother you, or does it not surprise you? Just
Well, I don't expect every investment bank to agree with everything I think. They have a lot of animal spirits in investment banking.
Bill, Charlie and Warren have weighed in on Bitcoin. Do you own any?
Somebody gave me some for my birthday, and then a few years later I thought, hey, I'm going to sell that. So no, there's some really good technology in terms of sharing databases and verifying transactions that is talked about as blockchain. That is a good thing. Bitcoin and ICOs, I agree completely. it's one of the crazier speculative things where it's not as an asset class, you're not producing anything, and so you shouldn't expect it to go up. It's kind of a pure greater fool theory type investment. So, you know, I agree. I would short it if there was an easy way to do it.
One of the interesting things, if people react when you criticize their investment, if they get mad, they're gambling. You know, if somebody criticizes Apple or Berkshire, we like it. I mean, if the stock goes down, we'll buy more of it because it's we don't care whether it's just we don't feel that it has anything to do with it. But if we criticize something that they own because they only want it to go up tomorrow, they feel we are hurting them, and therefore they get very upset about it. If they really like what they own, what difference would it make? You know, if I criticize their wife or something, they don't get all upset about it.
Wait a minute. That's a bad habit.
Yeah, probably not the perfect example to use.
We just had a conversation with Charlie Munger about a week and a half ago, and I asked him if he thought the golden era of value investing was over. And he said, no, not for forever, but he thinks the game is a lot harder than it used to be. What are your thoughts just in terms of looking around, trying to find businesses, trying to find pieces of business versus when you started the game?
Well, it's harder for two reasons, one of which is peculiar to us, is we've got a lot more money. So our universe of possible things to do has shrunk from thousands and thousands of things that I used to look at when I had small amounts of money to relatively few things now.
See, that seems to defy logic. I have more money, so I have fewer things I can do. But it's just because a deal, it's got to be much bigger.
Doesn't move the needle.
Yeah.
So there's probably 100 stocks. You know, if we put $5 billion in something and it's 10% of the market cap, which would be as much as it would be, you're talking 50 billion in up market caps, and 5 billion is 1% of Berkshire's value. So if it goes up 50%, we make 0.5%, you know, basically on value before tax, 40 basis points afterwards.
I'd love to have your problems.
Yeah. So, and then the second thing is, I mean, obviously got way more competition than when we started really when I took Ben Graham's class in 1951. I mean, the whole world was my oyster because people were not going through the manuals, and you had to. It's easier to get the data now, for one thing. I mean, just with the internet, far easier. And I used to mail away for annual reports and go to the Interstate Commerce Commission, the Public Utility Commission, the Insurance Commission. I went to all those offices and dug through papers, and now it's, you know, it takes five seconds for somebody to get the same information.
I'll ask this very fleetingly. Has your position changed on Bitcoin?
No, I mean, it's too bad, but Bitcoin, it's ingenious, and blockchain is important, but Bitcoin has no unique value at all. It doesn't produce anything. You can stare at it all day, and no little Bitcoins come out or anything like that. It's a delusion, basically.
So we've gone from rat poison squared to a delusion. Well, kind of an upgrade.
Yeah, I don't. Who knows where we'll be next year? But I'm really sorry it happens, because people get their hopes up that something like that is going to change their lives, and it was a very ingenious thing to figure out how to have a limited supply and make it harder more expensive to create them as you go along, and all that sort of thing. But it doesn't. The function. And this is explained to me by people a lot smarter than I am, but they say blockchain does not depend on, and JP Morgan is talking about creating their own, you know, JPM, and it'll be worth $1. I mean, it's matched to the dollar to dollar, and I'm sympathetic to people that own it.
About 5 years ago, we asked Charlie Munger, we were sitting right there, what he thought of Bitcoin, and he said, rat poison. Yeah. Back then it was about $100+ per Bitcoin. Today it's 9,000. Is it still rat poison?
Well, it's probably rat poison squared.
Well, I shouldn't answer any questions on the subject, but I will. You know, there's all kinds of people watching this that are long Bitcoin, and there's nobody that's short, and nobody wants their windpipe stepped on. I don't blame them. I don't like people who step on my windpipe. But I would say this, that if the people in this room owned all of the farmland in the United States, and you offered me a 1% interest in it, and you said, for a 1% interest in all the farmland in the United States, pay our group. Well, let's see, 10 trillion. Pay us this bargain price, $25 billion. I'll write you a check this afternoon, $25 billion. Now I own 1% of the farmland. If you tell me you own 1% of the apartment houses in the United States, and you offer me a 1% interest, so I'll have a 1% interest in all the apartment houses in the country, and you want whatever it may be for it, and call it another $25 billion or something, I'll write you a check. It's very simple. Now, if you told me you owned all of the Bitcoin in the world, and you offered it to me for $25, I wouldn't take it, because what would I do with it? I have to sell it back to you one way or another. I mean, they have the same people, but it isn't going to do anything. The apartments are going to produce rental, and the farms are going to produce food. And if I've got all the Bitcoin, I'm back where whatever his name was, who may or may not have existed, was 15 years ago. If I've got it all, he could create a mystery about it. But everybody knows what I'm like. I mean, so if I'm trying to get rid of it, people will say, well, why should I buy some Bitcoin from you? I mean, why don't you call it Buffett coin? Make your own or something. What? Do something. But I'm not going to give you anything for it. And you'd be right, incidentally. But that explains the difference between productive assets and something that depends on the next guy paying you more than the last guy got. Now, net, if you look at it, a lot of commissions have been paid, and there's all kinds of frictional costs that are very real that somebody has paid to a bunch of people who facilitate this game. But whatever one group of the public has taken out, or one group of owners, has come in from other people. I mean, it's other people have entered the room and they move money around, but there's no more money in the room. It just changed hands with a lot of maybe fraud and costs involved, and a whole bunch of things. You lose, you forget the numbers or forget the equation. You can do that with a lot of things. I mean, it's been done throughout history. Certain things have value that don't produce something tangible. I mean, you can say a great painting, probably will have some value 500 years from now. May not, but the odds are pretty good that if it was a big enough name, at some point, there will be a few things. I mean, you can find something. If somebody wants to sell you a pyramid or something, and you can charge the viewers, or it'll be around a long time and won't produce anything. But people will find it interesting to go there because I've read about the pyramids. But basically, assets to have value, they have to deliver something to somebody, and there's only one currency that's acceptable in the United States. I mean, you can come up with all kinds of things. We can put out Berkshire coins, or we can put up Berkshire money or anything like that. But we get in trouble, I guess, if we call it money. But in the end, this is money, and there's no reason in the world why the United States government, whose currency people prefer, there's $2.3 just under 2.3 trillion just of these little pieces of paper floating around some places, 7,000 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. And of course, most of them probably aren't in the United States. Who knows? But this is the only thing that's money. And anybody that thinks the United States is going to change the way they let Berkshire money replace theirs, is out of their mind. I mean, so anyway, with those few deficiencies, you can, whether it goes up or down in the next year or 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. But the one thing I'm pretty sure of is that it doesn't multiply, it doesn't produce anything. It's got a magic to it, and people have attached magics to lots of things. I mean, the gold on Wall Street, create magic. We are not an insurance company; we're a tech company. Well, they're an insurance company, but a dozen people or so have raised a lot of money. They just say, just don't pay any attention to the fact that we sell insurance. We are a tech company. Well, in the end, they wrote insurance, and overwhelmingly, they've lost a lot of money since then. You can make up things that work well in getting money from other people, and that's why